Hello. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from Priorat. This wine is El Tribut de Scala Dei 2022. So Priorat, a region in southeast Spain, particularly in the hills to the southeast of Barcelona. And Scala Dei is by far the oldest producer in this prestigious Spanish wine region. Priorat is arguably one of Spain's leading wine regions, and in fact with Rioja is one of only two DOC wine regions. The region tends to combine a hot, dry climate with low-yielding old bush vines planted in high-altitude sites on hillsides, and the soils that are favoured here are what are called licorella soils. So these are dark-coloured soils, slate soils that may include some quartz. They're soils that are free-draining and low in nutrients, so the vine has to work hard to live in these conditions. Now, Priorat as a region rose to fame in the second half of the 20th century, but Scala Dei, the winery for a Carthusian Monastery, has been making wine here since at least the 11th century. Priorat only gained its DO status in 1954 and then was recognised by the Catalan regional government as a DOQ in the year 2000. It wasn't until 2009 that Priorat was given DOC status by the Spanish government. And the winery at Scala Dei played a part in this. In 1973, for instance, they were the first winery to bottle and sell the wines of Priorat. More recently, in 2000, the Cordonui Group, a group primarily making CAVA, took a 25% stake in the winery and have helped improve winemaking methods and the distribution of these wines. The recognised varieties that can be used here are predominantly Garnacha, complemented by Carignan or Samso to give its local name. But there are 8 other authorised grape varieties that can be used in the production of Priorat. This particular wine is, I believe, 60% Grenache, with 25% of Syrah and 15% of Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, I have seen different blends suggested, however I'm not convinced that those are correct. The wine has the name Tribute. It's supposed to be a tribute to the historic winery and its vineyards, and it aims to be quite a modern and relatively accessible style of Priorat. Traditionally, the wines of Priorat could be very rustic, and being made from Grenache and perhaps being made without temperature control, they could be quite rich, high alcohol, with rustic tannins and volatile fruit. The vineyards that provide the fruit for this wine are at altitudes between 400 and 800 metres above sea level, thus giving a cooling influence to what would otherwise be a very hot region, with these dark soils reflecting heat back at the grapes to ripen. Soils in the vineyards here are a combination of the classic licorella soils, and also there are some soils with red clay, which supposedly make wines with a slightly lighter nature. Despite their altitude, these vineyards sit at the foot of the Sierra de Montsant. Evidently, viticulture is conducted organically, although I would say there's no certification of that evident on the label. I'm told the vine age in these vineyards is between 15 and 30 years, and yields are kept low. The region's yields cannot be more than 6 tonnes per hectare and are frequently lower than that. The fruit is hand-picked and ferments in small open fermenters. These have a capacity of 7,000 kilograms, and fermentation goes on with the indigenous yeasts that have found their way into the winery on the fruit. The period of skin contact lasts for just 12 to 16 days, and the wine aged for a year in French oak barrels. They don't describe the size of the barrels or their age. I would assume that they're seasoned oaks, so I'm not expecting to get strong flavours and aromas of oak. The final note I'd make is that I'd say that this is vegan friendly, and therefore it should be safe to say it won't have been treated with any animal products at all. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? The colour has a lovely vibrancy. It's relatively dark ruby of medium depth. I can see fairly easily through the wine to see the stem of the glass. Swirling it, the wine is labelled as being 14% alcohol. It's clinging to the side of the glass. As I'm talking, it's slowly getting round to forming some tears. So clearly there's some weight there, whether that's tannins or alcohol, we will find out. Let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? There's quite a closed, savoury, slightly meaty nature to the aromas. There's clearly a relatively ripe, almost sort of vibrant cherry fruit to the aroma, but it is overlaid by these more savoury notes. And there are hints of spice, more sort of peppery spice, sitting at the back of the aromas. I'm not detecting any obvious oak notes. So let's taste. On the palate, that's initially smooth. There's a lovely vibrancy and a fresh cherry fruit. And then you get a little bit more sort of drying, slightly spicy, peppery tannin cutting in there. Starting to pick out some hints of licorice. From having been drying, the mid palate and the back of my tongue actually become quite smooth. I think some of the rounded texture comes from the alcohol, and there's a little bit of warmth, but not really a burn. I'm actually being left with slightly more of a black fruit note, sort of heading towards damson, that sort of black plum sort of fruit. The acidity is nicely in balance. There's just enough to give a sensation of freshness to the fruit on the finish without it being sharp or harsh. While there is some firmness to the tannins, this certainly isn't an old-fashioned or rustic style of Priorat. Yet you can see these hints of spice and savoury notes that make a nod to its history. It's a wine that's providing plenty of flavour without being huge, as I say, medium to full-bodied. It's lasting well, it's not hugely complex, but there's a reasonable depth and structure. I think, again, as is often the case with Garnacha and Syrah-based wines like this is a wine that would be nice and versatile and would match a spectrum of foods, from the powerful to the more delicate. You could drink this with cold meats, drink this with rich stews, and it would fit both occasions really nicely. Looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this vintage of this wine, it scores 88 out of 100. I think it might have been slightly hard done by, but I think that's a pretty reasonable score. I think it's a wine you could probably age for 3 or 4 years, but I don't see a need for it. It doesn't have harsh tannins. There is a lovely smoothness and a modern style to the winemaking. It allows you to enjoy it with just its hints of rusticity, even now when it's less than 3 years old. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed our tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. We'd really appreciate that. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please sign up and subscribe to our channel. That way you can set yourself an alert and be notified every time we publish a new tasting. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. We would really love your feedback on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to pass it on. We'd really appreciate that. I'll leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and hopefully you'll be able to find the wine in your market at a price that's agreeable to you. You can also use the tabs on those pages to give you lots of additional information about the wine. You can look at the region, you can look at the grape varieties, you can see some winemaking detail there, you can see what the critics have had to say, and you can read other users' comments. You can also see a price history, and there's a tab you can use to do a vintage comparison. So I hope all that's useful to you if you're thinking of buying the wine, but more importantly, do please try and find some time, come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.